A penthouse suite ticket costs more than a car. For that price, you expect luxury, respect, and peace. But for one passenger, Margaret Sterling, her $10,000 ticket wasn't enough. When she saw the man in the adjoining suite, a black man in a simple bright blue hoodie, she demanded he be moved. She called him an element, a threat. She had no idea she was speaking to Marcus Thorne, and she had no idea that the card she carried wasn't just for a stateroom. That card belonged to the entire cruise line. What follows is the real-life story of how arrogance on the high seas leads to a fall so hard it shatters a life. The Zenith Cruise Line VIP lounge at the Miami Port Terminal was an oasis of curated silence. It smelled of expensive leather, brewed espresso, and the faint citrusy temps of complimentary champagne. Passengers here didn't just wait to board. They resided in a state of suspended privilege, in a discreet corner, tucked away from the main thoroughfare of clicking heels and rolling. Carry-on sat a man who seemed at first glance out of place. He wasn't in a suit. He wore a simple, unbranded, bright blue hoodie, expensive looking but understated dark gray joggers, and a pair of minimalist high-end sneakers. His name was Marcus Thorne. He had a pair of noise-canceling headphones over his ears, but no music was playing. He was listening. He observed the staff. How a bartender polished a glass twice before serving. How a lounge attendant smiled genuinely at an elderly couple. How another attendant sighed just for a second when a passenger left a messy table. Marcus wasn't just a passenger. He was a ghost, an auditor, the new CEO of Zenith Cruise Line. Traveling incognito on his own ship to see the unvarnished truth of his operation. This transatlantic voyage to Southampton was the last leg of his 2-week mystery shopper tour. He nursed a simple bottle of water, his gaze thoughtful. The calm was abruptly punctured. "For goodness sake, Arthur, can you walk any slower? They'll give our staterooms away." Margaret Sterling burst into the lounge like a nor'easter. A whirlwind of sharp angles and sharper perfume. She was in her late 40s, her blonde hair locked in a severe helmet-like bob. Her blazer was a powerful, aggressive shade of red. Its shoulder pads a relic from a more assertive decade. Tailing her was Arthur Penn, a man who seemed to be perpetually braced for impact. He was younger, paler, and clutching 2 roller bags and a laptop case. "The ship doesn't leave for another 45 minutes, Margaret," Arthur murmured, wiping a sheen of sweat from his upper lip. "We're in Group 1. They can't give our staterooms away. Don't be naive, Arthur. Competence is about anticipation, and that," she said, stabbing a finger toward the champagne bar, "is not Veuve Clicquot. It's some cheap American sparkling. This lounge has gone to the dogs. Get me a glass and find us a seat away from the masses." She scanned the room with open disdain, her eyes sweeping over the quiet passengers. They snagged on Marcus in his corner. Her upper lip curled for just a fraction of a second. She saw a hoodie, a skin color, and a posture of relaxation. Her internal calculus filed him under "does not belong." She dismissed him and aimed for a set of plush armchairs nearer the window. Arthur, meanwhile, was a bundle of nerves. "Margaret, are you sure you reviewed the final slides for the pitch? The London meeting is, well, it's everything. Sterling Logistics is counting on this Zenith contract." "Arthur." Margaret snapped loud enough for half the lounge to hear. "Stop whimpering. I built Sterling Logistics from my basement. I know how to close a deal. This new CEO at Zenith, this Thorne, he's a tech guy. He doesn't know logistics. He just knows data. Our software is the best data platform on the market. They need us. The contract is a formality. Now get the champagne. My throat is dry from explaining your own job to you." Arthur flinched as if struck. "Right away, Margaret," he said, scurrying off. Margaret sat, pulled out her phone, and began typing with loud, aggressive taps of her acrylic nails. The sound was a sharp click-clack. Click that cut through the lounge's peace. Marcus watched the entire exchange over the rim of his water bottle. He knew exactly who Margaret Sterling was. Sterling Logistics was a mid-level vendor. one of a dozen firms bidding for Zenith's next-generation cargo tracking contract. He'd seen her name on a preliminary report. The report had noted their software was functional but buggy, and their leadership was abrasive. Abrasive, Marcus thought, was a very polite word. He'd been a tech guy. Yes, he'd made his first billion in Silicon Valley, but he'd also been an Air Force combat medic. He knew how to read people under pressure. He knew arrogance and he knew desperation when it was poorly disguised as confidence. Margaret Sterling, he surmised, was a bully, and she was terrified. Her company was likely leveraged to the hilt. And this London contract was her last lifeline. Arthur returned, balancing a flute of champagne. "Here you go, Margaret. It's about time. Did you check the gate? Is it crowded?" "I hate crowded boarding gates." "It's fine, Margaret." "Don't tell me fine, Arthur. Be precise." "Fine is a word for lazy people." As she berated her subordinate, Marcus stood up. He pulled his bright blue hood up slightly, slung his simple leather duffel bag over his shoulder, and began a slow walk toward the exit, timing his arrival at the gangway for the very beginning of priority boarding. He wanted to test the embarkation staff, too. He passed Margaret's seat. She didn't look up, but she physically leaned away from him as he passed. It's a small, sharp intake of breath, as if he were a carrier of some disease. Marcus didn't break his stride. He just kept walking, his expression unreadable. The storm was gathering, and he was walking right into its center. The gangway to the Zenith seas was pristine, the plush blue carpet absorbing the sound of footsteps. Marcus was one of the first to board, greeting the ship's staff at the door with a quiet hello and a nod. "Welcome aboard, sir." The first steward, a young woman with an Emily Nama tag, chirped. "Owner's Suite 1A is just to your left." Marcus found his suite, a magnificent sky suite with a sliding privacy door, its own minibar, a large balcony, and a 24-inch screen. It was one of the cruise line's flagship products. He stowed his duffel, sat, and immediately began examining the small details. The cleanliness of the seams, the stocking of the minibar, the responsiveness of the touchscreen controls. He was so engrossed in his silent audit that he barely registered the other penthouse passengers filing in. Then he heard her voice. "This one. 1B. Are you certain?" Marcus looked up. Margaret Sterling was standing in the corridor, her face a mask of thunder. Her subordinate Arthur Penn was hovering behind her, his own suite to be, just across the way. Margaret was staring not at her suite, but at Marcus, who was in the adjoining suite. 1A. Due to the structure of the balcony suites, they were near each other, separated only by a partition. Emily. The steward smiled, a little strained. "Yes, Ms. Sterling, 1B, right by the starboard side. It's one of our best suites." "Absolutely not," Margaret said. The words were low and final. Emily blinked. I'm sorry, ma'am. Is there a problem with the suite?" Margaret didn't look at Emily. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger directly at Marcus. "I am not sitting next to him for 7 days." The hushed corridor fell silent. A man in 2F reading the Wall Street Journal slowly lowered his paper. Arthur Penn looked like he might faint. Marcus simply met her gaze, his expression neutral. Emily was completely wrong-footed. "Ma'am, Mr. Thorne is also a ticketed penthouse passenger. The suites are private once the door is closed." "I don't care if the door closes," Margaret hissed, her voice rising. "This is the penthouse deck. I paid $10,000 for this ticket. I am a platinum-level executive. I am not going to be made to feel uncomfortable by this. This element." The word hung in the air, toxic and heavy. Element. Marcus slowly, deliberately took his headphones from around his neck and placed them on the console beside him. He still hadn't said a word. Emily, who looked to be barely out of her training, was trembling slightly. "Ma'am, I can assure you all our passengers are ... "Don't you assure me of anything?" Margaret snapped. "Look at him. He's probably on fake miles. He's probably... I don't know. He looks dangerous. I want him moved or you move me. I will not stay here. I can't just move a passenger, ma'am." The ship is full. Then make it unfull. I am the customer. He's probably carrying something. Get your supervisor. Get the captain. I want this handled now. Or I'm tweeting about this. I'll tag Zenith. I'll tag the Coast Guard. I'll tag everyone. Arthur Penn finally found his voice. A desperate squeak. Margaret, please just settle in. The partition is high. You won't even see him. It's the principle, Arthur. You wouldn't understand. You're too soft. This is what's wrong with the world. People like that, she gestured at Marcus again, are allowed to infest premium spaces. I want your supervisor now. Emily, near tears, nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. One moment. She fled down the corridor. Margaret stood in the hallway, arms crossed, vibrating with self-righteous fury. She refused to make eye contact with Marcus, instead glaring at the porthole as if it too had personally offended her. Marcus, for his part, finally moved. He didn't stand. He didn't raise his voice. He simply pressed the call button on his console. A soft ding echoed in the tense silence. A moment later, a different officer appeared. This was James, the chief purser. He was in his 50s with a calm, authoritative presence that Emily had lacked. He'd clearly been briefed, but his eyes were on Marcus, who had summoned him. Yes, sir. Can I help you? James asked Marcus. Before Marcus could speak, Margaret steamrolled the conversation. I'm the one who needs help. This steward of yours, she spat the word, refused to accommodate a perfectly reasonable safety and comfort request. James turned his smooth, professional gaze on her. Ms. Sterling, I am James, the chief purser for this voyage. I understand there is a concern with your accommodation arrangement. My concern, said Margaret, is that I am placed next to a man who clearly does not belong here and is making me feel unsafe. I want to move to a different deck. I want him in the crew quarters or the bottom deck where he belongs. This was it, the final unforgivable line. The man in 2F audibly gasped, "Oh, my word!" Arthur Penn closed his eyes, his face ashen. Marcus Thorne locked eyes with James the purser. And in that moment, James's professional mask cracked. His eyes widened, not in anger, but in sudden dawning recognition. He'd seen the face before, not in person, but in the all-staff memos. In the corporate newsletter. In the welcome email that had been sent out to all 80,000 employees 6 months ago. The bright blue hoodie and joggers had thrown him. But the eyes, the calm, intelligent, powerful eyes were unmistakable. James's blood ran cold. James's posture changed in a nanosecond. He went from a confident purse managing a difficult passenger to a soldier who had just seen his general walk onto the battlefield. He straightened his back so rigidly it almost hurt. Ms. Sterling, James said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming formal and chilled. I can assure you with absolute certainty that the passenger in Suite 1A belongs on this deck. Oh, can you? Margaret sneered. And how would you know? Did you frisk him? Did you check his background? Or are you just going to let your woke corporate policy put me at risk? Ma'am, I am asking you politely to please take your suite. You are delaying our departure procedures. I will not. I am the customer. What is your name? James, I will have your job for this. I will have Emily's job. I will call your corporate office the second we dock. My company, Sterling Logistics, spends millions of dollars on sea travel. You are making a colossal mistake. Finally, Marcus spoke. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the cabin like a surgical laser, calm and precise. James, he said, not taking his eyes off Margaret. The passenger in 1B is correct. She should not be in that suite. Margaret's face flooded with triumph. See? Thank you. At least he understands. Now move him to the back, Marcus continued, his voice perfectly level. She's right. She does not belong in the penthouse class. Not on this ship. Not ever again. Margaret's smug smile evaporated. What? What did you just say to me? Who do you think you are? This was the moment Marcus turned his full attention to the purser. James, what's my Zenith key? Executive level clearance code. James didn't hesitate. 0001 Alpha, sir. Eh? And what does that code signify? Chairman and CEO, sir. Thank you, James. Marcus stood up. He wasn't a large man, but he commanded the space. He was trim, fit, and radiated an authority that had nothing to do with suits or titles, and everything to do with innate power. He slowly unzipped his bright blue hoodie. Underneath, as Margaret and Arthur stared in abject horror, was a simple, bright blue polo shirt. Embroidered on the chest in subtle silver thread was the Zenith Cruise Line logo. The stylized Z with a swooping wave, the insignia reserved for C-suite executives. Margaret Sterling's jaw unhinged. The blood drained from her face, leaving a pasty gray mask. "Thorne?" she whispered. The name was a choked gasp. Marcus ... Thorne. Arthur Penn behind her had been frantically typing on his phone. He had just Googled Marcus Thorne, CEO Zenith. The phone slipped from his nerveless fingers and clattered onto the carpet. "Oh, God," Arthur whispered, sinking into his seat. "Oh my God, Margaret. That's him. That's the CEO." The corridor was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning. Marcus looked at Margaret. There was no anger in his eyes, just a profound cold disappointment. "Ms. Sterling, you had a problem with my hoodie. You had a problem with my skin color. You called me an element. You assumed I didn't belong. You threatened the jobs of my crew. You announced in an area full of my customers that your company, Sterling Logistics, believes this behavior is acceptable." "No," she squeaked, her voice a desperate, strangled sound. I didn't mean it. It was a misunderstanding. I was tired, jet-lagged. I didn't recognize you." "That," Marcus said, "is the entire problem. You shouldn't have to recognize me. I could be anyone. I was anyone, and you treated me like an infestation. You treated me like I was dangerous." He turned to James. "James, you and Emily handled this with professionalism, even under extreme duress. Please accept my personal apologies that you had to endure this." "Not at all, Mr. Thorne," James said, his voice stiff with protocol. "Now," Marcus said, his gaze returning to Margaret, "we have a problem to solve. You still require a new stateroom. I believe you wanted to be away from people like me. One want to accommodate that. James, please check the manifest. I'm sure we have an open cabin. Perhaps deck 2, inner cabin 2045. James knew the ship's layout intimately. The inner cabins on deck 2 were narrow, windowless rooms just above the waterline, typically reserved for staff or backup use. James's face remained impassive. "I will check, sir. I am almost certain we can accommodate Ms. Sterling in that precise cabin." "No!" Margaret shrieked, the desperation making her voice crack. "Please, Mr. Thorne, the meeting. The London meeting. It's vital. My company, please, I apologize. It was a terrible mistake." "The mistake was made, Ms. Sterling," Marcus said, his voice void of all emotion. "The apology is rejected. As for our meeting, consider this. Consider it concluded." Margaret Sterling stood frozen in the corridor, a living statue of humiliation. Her face, which had been pale gray, now flushed a blotchy, painful red. The eyes of every passenger in the penthouse deck were on her, a mixture of pity, disgust, and stunned silence. "Mr. Thorne, I am begging you," she tried again, her voice a low, desperate plea. My company. This will ruin me." "Your behavior ruined you, Ms. Sterling," Marcus said, his voice never rising. "Your prejudice has a cost. Today, you get the invoice." He motioned to James. "Please escort Ms. Sterling to her new cabin. We are holding up the ship." "Yes, sir." James gestured crisply to Emily, who had reappeared, her eyes wide. "Emily, please assist me." James stepped toward Margaret. "Miss Sterling, this way, please." This was the moment of no return. Margaret had one last card to play, and she played it with the frantic energy of a cornered animal. She turned on her subordinate. Arthur, she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at him. Arthur, don't just sit there. Fix this. Tell him. Tell him it was your idea. Tell him. Tell him anything. Arthur Penn looked at the woman who had bullied him for 3 years. He looked at the CEO of the cruise line that held his entire career in its hands. He saw his tyrant of a boss, in one spectacularly racist implosion, attempting to pull him down into the wreckage with her. And Arthur, the timid, browbeaten assistant, made a decision. He stood up slowly. He straightened his tie. He looked past Margaret directly at Marcus Thorne. "Mr. Thorne?" Arthur said, his voice shaking but clear. "My name is Arthur Penn. I was the senior project manager at Sterling Logistics assigned to the Zenith pitch. On behalf of myself, I want to apologize profoundly for the unacceptable conduct you've just witnessed. Ms. Sterling's views are her own. They do not reflect my values, and they do not reflect the hard work of the technical team who built the software you're here to review. It was a masterful betrayal." In one speech, he had apologized, condemned his boss, separated himself from her, recentered the pitch, and complimented Marcus's presumed technical background. Marcus studied Arthur for a long moment. He saw the opportunism, but he also saw the kernel of truth. This was a man who had just been handed an escape route, and he was sprinting through it. Marcus nodded once. "Mr. Penn, your former boss has a new cabin waiting for her. You, however, are ticketed for Suite to B. Please take your seat. We can discuss logistics during the voyage. I'm curious to hear about your technical team's work." "Yes, sir." "Thank you, sir." Arthur sat down so fast he nearly missed the cushion. He didn't spare Margaret a single glance. That was the final cut. The betrayal from her own subordinate broke Margaret's remaining composure. A small animal-like sound of despair escaped her lips. "Miss Sterling," James said, his voice now granite, "you will come with me now, or you will be removed from the ship by port police. The choice is yours." Defeated, her shoulders slumped. The power-red blazer now looked like a costume on a broken doll. Ease, all right. She picked up her expensive leather carry dash-on. James and Emily stood, one in front, one behind, like a formal honor guard of shame. And the walk began. It was the longest walk of her life. She was paraded out of the hushed sanctuary of the penthouse class, through the suite deck where passengers peered over their welcome drinks with undisguised curiosity, through the crowds on the main pool deck, and then down through the crew access doors. The lower decks, the passengers here were different. It was a cacophony of families, students, and vacationers settling in. They saw a well-dressed older woman, her face streaked with tears, being marched to the bottom of the ship by 2 stern-looking staff members. And they knew this was a problem passenger. Whispers followed her. People pointed. "Look at her. Must be drunk. Bet she threw a fit." Entitled, "Wow," taking her all the way down. Every step was a fresh humiliation. Every stare was a hot poker. She, Carolyn Harding, who flew only first, who demanded only the best, was being subjected to the walk of shame. A pariah in a metal hall. Finally. They reached that narrow corridor on deck, too. The smell of dampness from the laundry and the vibration of the engines were already palpable. James opened door number 2045. It was a windowless 4-berth inner cabin. There were already 2 people inside. One was a man snoring on the top bunk, the other a tired woman rocking a constantly crying baby. The ship was fully booked, and this was a shared temporary accommodation area used as emergency overflow. Margaret stared at the narrow gap of worn blue fabric. You can't be serious." "This is your cabin, ma'am," Emily said, her voice no longer chirpy, just flat. "Please stow your bag. The ship is about to depart." The man on the bunk opened one eye, looked her up and down, and then with a loud grunt turned back to the wall. "Now," James commanded, shaking. Margaret crammed her designer bag under the bunk, snagging her fingernail. She hiked up her skirt, and with all the dignity she could muster, which was none, squeezed past the crying mother and collapsed onto the thin, Unyielding mattress of the bottom bunk. James and Emily turned without another word and closed the door. The door shut with a heavy, final thud. The engines began to whine. Margaret Sterling was trapped up in Suite 1A. Marcus Thorne accepted a glass of chilled water from James. He put his headphones on, selected a calm classical playlist, and closed his eyes as the Zenith seas gracefully departed the port and glided toward the night ocean. The first night of the 7-day transatlantic crossing to Southampton became, for Margaret Sterling, a perfect condensed eternity of misery. The man on the top bunk began snoring before the ship even left the harbor. It wasn't a gentle snore. It was a rattling, wet, industrial sound that vibrated the bunk posts. The baby in the adjacent bunk, startled by the engine noise and movement, began to wail. It was a full-throated, piercing scream that seemed to have no end. Margaret was sandwiched between a wall of sound and a wall of despair. There was no room service, only a vending machine in the corridor. When dinner time came, she was too ashamed to go to the main dining room, so she made do with mints from her purse. She had to email her office. She had to try and salvage the deal to get ahead of Arthur. But the ship's Wi-Fi portal, for some reason, wouldn't accept her credit card. It just kept flashing. Payment error. She tried 3 different cards. Nothing. She was cut off. Meanwhile, in the serene quiet of Suite 1A, a very different conversation was taking place. Marcus had finished his own light meal, a seared salmon salad, and was now talking with Arthur Penn. Chief Purser James had discreetly invited Arthur to sit at the dining table within Marcus's suite. The core of the software, Arthur was explaining. His initial terror replaced by a frantic, focused energy isn't just tracking. That's what Margaret always focused on. The real innovation, which I and my team designed, is predictive logistics. We use your own cargo data, cross-reference with weather patterns, port delays, and even regional political sentiment to predict supply chain failures before they happen. Marcus was impressed. He was, as Margaret had noted, a tech guy. He'd read Arthur's name on the technical documents, not hers. Kate and the buggy interface? The reports I read said it was functional but abrasive, much like its namesake. Arthur winced but nodded. That was a source of great frustration. Ms. Sterling insisted on a flashy user interface full of pop-ups and alerts. She called it assertive design. We called it unusable. The real engine, the code I wrote, is clean. It's designed to be slotted into an existing system like Zenith's. The Sterling interface is just a bad skin. So you're saying, Marcus said, leaning forward, the product she was trying to sell me is garbage. But the product you built, hidden underneath it, is what I actually need. Yes, Mr. Thorne, that's exactly what I'm saying, Arthur said. His eyes gleaming with the fervor of an engineer finally allowed to speak. Marcus sat back. Interesting. Tell me more about your team, Arthur. 4 hours into the voyage, somewhere over the dark Atlantic, a new crisis emerged. The public address system chimed. Code Alpha, main dining room. Code Alpha, main dining room. Then a commotion began in the corridors. In cabin 2045 on the lower deck, Margaret was jolted from a miserable, neck-cramping doze. The commotion was coming from the corridor outside. Someone was yelling. He collapsed. I think he's having a heart attack. Is there a doctor? The ship's medical team had been summoned, but the dining room staff was in panic. Margaret, stuck in her seat, saw her chance, a chance for redemption. She wasn't a doctor, but she was important. She could manage the situation. Let me through, she yelled at the mother who was trying to calm her now hysterical baby. I'm a first-class passenger. I can help move. She shoved her way into the corridor, barking orders. Everyone, stay back. Give him air. Somebody get water. She was just making noise, adding to the chaos. A passenger playing pretend, and then a blur of motion came down the stairs. Marcus Thorne, still in his bright blue polo and joggers, was sprinting down the stairs toward the dining room entrance. He wasn't running like a CEO. He was running like someone who knew exactly what to do. Move! he commanded, his voice the sharp, clear bark of a military commander. Margaret froze, standing uselessly in the corridor as Marcus pushed past her. Marcus reached the fallen passenger, an elderly man in his 70s, who was clutching his chest, his face a deathly blue. He didn't hesitate. He knelt, checking for a pulse, then for breath. "He's in cardiac arrest." He looked at Emily, who had arrived with the emergency medical kit. "Get me the AED now." "You," he pointed to another passenger. "Help me get him onto a flat surface." They moved the man to the floor. Marcus ripped the man's shirt open and immediately began chest compressions. He was not a tech billionaire in that moment. He was a medic. His past training, long dormant, came flooding back. "Clear," shouted, placing the pads from the AED. The machine word, "shock advised, stand clear." He pressed the button. The man's body jumped. Marcus was immediately back on his chest, counting compressions, breathing for him, working with a focused, desperate, professional calm. Margaret Sterling just stood there, clutching a railing, completely and utterly useless. She watched as the man she had dismissed as a thug, an element, a threat, literally held a man's life in his hands. He was a hero. She was nothing. Just then, the captain's voice came over the PA. Grim and urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain speaking. Due to the severe medical emergency on board, we will be diverting. We are heading for the nearest suitable port, Bermuda, for medical evacuation. We expect to meet port authorities in approximately 4 hours. The emergency evacuation transfer in Bermuda was executed with flawless precision. A Coast Guard boat pulled alongside the ship. Marcus had not stopped. He and the ship's doctor, guided by Marcus's expertise, had managed to stabilize the passenger. The man was breathing again, his pulse steady but present. When the paramedics boarded, Marcus gave them a rapid, professional handover, rattling off vital signs. Shocks administered and time of incident. The passenger's tearful wife gripped Marcus's arm. "Thank you," she wept. "God bless you. You saved him." Marcus just nodded, his face grim. "They'll take good care of him, ma'am." He retreated quietly as the medical team took over, his polo shirt sweat-stained. The corridor, which had been a scene of high-stakes drama, was now quiet. The passengers stunned, watching the elderly man be carefully lifted and carried off the ship. Margaret had long since slunk back to cabin 2045. That airless hole, her entire body numb. The last crumb of hope she'd had of redeeming herself had been incinerated. She hadn't just been proven wrong. She'd been proven irrelevant. She was a loud, empty suit. The man she'd scorned was a man of action, substance, and quiet heroism. After the transfer and refueling, the ship set course again for Southampton. The mood upon arrival at Southampton port was subdued. The ship docked, an announcement was made. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Southampton. Please wait until the ship has come to a complete stop. We know you are all anxious to disembark, but we ask that you allow penthouse guests to disembark first." A bitter laugh escaped Margaret's lips. The penthouse and suite passengers began to gather their things. Marcus, who had returned to 1A, was the first one at the door, met by James. "Mr. Thorne," James said, his voice low. "Extraordinary work, sir, truly." "You and your crew were the extraordinary ones, James," Marcus replied, slinging his duffel bag over his shoulder. "You kept calm. You handled 2 major incidents on one voyage. My compliments." He stepped off the ship onto the pier, where he was immediately met by a serious-looking woman in a Zenith Cruise Line uniform. "Mr. Thorne, Karen Miller, Southampton Station Manager. We were advised of the situation." "Your car is waiting. Thank you, Karen. How's the passenger we offloaded in Bermuda?" "Stable. He's at the regional hospital. They think he'll make a full recovery." "Thanks to you." "Good," Marcus said. He then gestured back toward the ship. "One more thing. Passenger Arthur Penn, suite to be. Have him join me. He'll be coming to the corporate office." "Right away, sir." Arthur Penn, who had overheard, scrambled to grab his bags. his face a mix of awe and naked ambition. He hurried after his new, infinitely more powerful boss. Back on the ship, the other passengers began to file out. Margaret waited, trapped in that small cabin as the entire ship slowly emptied. Finally, it was just her. The cleaning crew was starting to move through the corridors. "Ma'am," it was Emily, the young steward. Her voice was cold. "You can disembark now." Margaret gathered her things, her limbs stiff, her red blazer hopelessly wrinkled. She walked the long, empty corridor to the exit, but as she reached the door, James stepped in front of her. "Ms. Sterling, one moment, please." "What now?" she said, her voice a dull monotone. "You will not be disembarking with the general passengers. Please wait here." A moment later, two men in Southampton port security uniforms and a stony-faced Zenith ground agent boarded. Margaret panicked. Am I being arrested?" "No, ma'am," the ground agent said, reading from a tablet. "You are being formally removed from the premises per Zenith Cruise Line passenger conduct policy. Your behavior on voyage 815 was deemed discriminatory, abusive to staff, and a danger to the safe operation of the ship." He handed her a printed letter. "This is a formal notice. You are hereby banned for life from Zenith Cruise Line and all its partner carriers. Your return ticket has been canceled. You will be escorted to baggage claim to retrieve your luggage, and then you must leave port property. A lifetime ban." Her return ticket was gone. "But my meeting? My luggage? How do I get home?" "That, ma'am, is no longer our concern," the agent said. "This way, please." Flanked by the two security officers, Margaret Sterling was escorted like a common criminal through the back corridors of the port, bypassing customs in a sterile-feeling staff area, and unceremoniously deposited at the oversized baggage claim where her suitcase was the last one on the belt. She tried to call Arthur. The call went straight to voicemail. She sent him a text. "They've banned me. Arthur, where are you? Call me." A minute later, a text came back. "Margaret, I've been called into an emergency all-day session at Zenith Tower. Mr. Thorne wants a debrief on the software. I can't talk. Your hotel reservation was for one night. I assume you'll be checking out. I've had your corporate cards suspended, as per company policy on termination. Termination. A." Second text arrived. "The board of Sterling Logistics was informed of your conduct via an official complaint from Zenith's legal team. They voted to remove you as CEO, effective immediately. I'm sorry. I've been appointed acting CEO." Margaret's phone slipped from her hand. It didn't clatter. It landed on her foot, and she didn't even feel it. She was in London. She had no job. She had no hotel. She had no flight home, and she had no company. The next morning, Margaret Sterling found herself in the lobby of the Zenith Cruise Line corporate tower in central London. She hadn't slept. She'd spent the night in a £40 a night hostel near Heathrow, sharing a room with 6 backpacking students. She had spent the last of her personal cash on a train ticket into the city. She looked like a ghost. Her power blazer was a crumpled mess. Her hair was matted. Her makeup smeared. She was here for one last desperate gamble. She was going to find Marcus Thorne. She was going to fall on her knees, beg, cry. Anything to get him to reverse this. "I'm here to see Mr. Thorne," she told the receptionist, who looked at her with polite, undisguised alarm. "Do you have an appointment, ma'am?" "No, but it's Margaret Sterling. I was with Sterling Logistics. He's expecting me." The receptionist tapped on her computer. "I'm sorry. I don't see a Margaret Sterling on the visitor list. Please take a seat." Margaret sat on a hard, modern bench, and she waited. 1 hour passed. Men and women in sharp suits bustled by, sipping lattes, talking about contracts and routes. They ignored her. 2 hours. The morning rush faded. The lobby grew quiet. 3 hours. The receptionist was replaced by a new one for the lunch shift. Margaret was still sitting there. Finally, at 12:30 p.m., a woman with a sleek black haircut and a tablet emerged from the security gates. She was a vision of corporate power. Her dress a severe, elegant navy blue. She walked directly to Margaret, Miss Sterling. Yes. Margaret shot to her feet, hope surging. Yes, I'm here to see Mr. Thorne. I need to apologize, to explain. I am Sophia Chen. The woman said, her voice as crisp as a new banknote. I am the chief operating officer for Zenith. Mr. Thorne is otherwise engaged. He's currently in a meeting with your former associate, Mr. Penn. Margaret's face fell. Former. Yes, look, Ms. Chen. I made a terrible, terrible mistake. I am not that person. I was stressed. Mr. Thorne asked me to deliver this to you. Ms. Chen said, interrupting the apology as if it were static. She held out a single folded piece of paper. It was thick, expensive-feeling cardstock. What? What is this? Margaret asked, her hands shaking as she took it. Is it a legal summons? No, Ms. Chen said. It's an invoice. Margaret unfolded it. Her eyes scanned the contents. It was an official Zenith Cruise Line invoice made out to Ms. Margaret Sterling. Private individual. It had several line items. Passenger class reassignment fee penthouse to staff. £9 for 50 crew disruption and non-compliance fine. £5,000 special handling and security escort fee port. £1, 500 port diversions, surcharge fuel, port fees. Medical evacuation delay, £22,800 total due. £38,750 Margaret's vision tunneled. This is insane. I can't pay this. This is extortion. It's not, Ms. Chen said, her voice dangerously quiet. The reassignment fee is the cost differential of your ticket, which you forfeited. The fines are per the contract of carriage you agreed to. And the diversion surcharge. That's the one Mr. Thorne insisted on. But the diversion was for a medical emergency. Your own CEO saved that man. The diversion was required because of a medical emergency. Yes, Ms. Chen agreed. However, our crew logs corroborated by 3 passenger witnesses in your row state that during the initial crisis, you left your seat, refused crew instructions, and physically blocked the corridor for approximately 45 seconds while shouting at the crew. This in turn delayed our crew's initial response and their retrieval of the medical kit by that same 45 seconds. Our legal team, in consultation with our medical director, argued that your panic and interference directly contributed to the severity of the event, necessitating the diversion rather than allowing for onboard stabilization. This invoice is for the fuel, the landing fees at Bermuda, and the crew overtime. You endangered a man's life with your ego. Ms. Sterling, this is the bill. Margaret was no longer breathing. She was bankrupt. Her company was gone. Her career was gone. And now she was personally in debt for nearly £40,000. I can't pay this, she whispered, the paper shaking in her hand. Our legal department will be in touch to arrange a payment plan, Ms. Chen said. They are very effective. Ms. Chen turned to leave. As she did, the main elevator bank dinged. The polished chrome doors slid open. Out walked Marcus Thorne. He was not in a hoodie. He was in an impeccably tailored dark gray suit that probably cost more than her car. He looked every inch the billionaire CEO. He was laughing a warm, genuine laugh at something the man next to him had just said. The man next to him was Arthur Penn. Arthur was also in a new suit, looking energized and confident. Arthur, that's brilliant, Marcus was saying as they walked across the lobby. Forget the old Sterling platform. I'll poach your top 3 engineers. Give them whatever they want. We'll build your predictive logistics engine from scratch right here in-house. I want you to lead the integration team. Absolutely, Mr. Thorne, Arthur said, his face bright. We can have a prototype running in 6 months. They walked right past Margaret Sterling. Marcus didn't even glance at her. He didn't see her. She was, as she had called him, an element. Something to be dismissed, cleaned up, and forgotten. The 2 men passed through the security gates. Marcus clapped Arthur on the back as the gates hissed shut. Margaret Sterling was left alone in the vast, empty lobby, holding the invoice for the cost of her own prejudice. The fall was complete. Margaret stood in the lobby of Zenith Tower for a long moment. The paper felt heavy in her hand. A GBP 38,750 anchor. She stared at the spot where Marcus Thorne and Arthur Penn had disappeared. The lobby, once a symbol of her ambition, now felt like a mausoleum. A polite, firm cough brought her back. A security guard stood beside her. "Ma'am, if you don't have an appointment, I'm afraid I will have to ask you to leave." The words cut her. She looked at the guard and saw no malice, only professional indifference. She crumpled the invoice, then slowly smoothed it again. The numbers didn't care about her anger. She walked out through the revolving doors. The London air was damp and gray. She stood on the pavement, realizing her old life was gone and her new one had not yet begun. She was, for the first time, completely alone. 6 months later. The Zenith Cruise Line VIP lounge in Miami was unrecognizable. The dark leather was gone. The room was open, bright, filled with plant walls and Scandinavian furniture. In a quiet corner, Marcus Thorne sipped a black coffee. Across from him sat James, the former purser from Voyage 800, now in a sharp executive training suit. The final module for the Sentinel program rolls out to all 12,000 crew members next week. "Mr. Thorne," James said with calm confidence, "we focused on what you specified, empowering the crew. Authority to de-escalate, tools to identify an abrasive passenger early, then full company backing to issue warnings or call security." Marcus nodded. "And the name, Sentinel Program." James smiled. It was the team's idea. "We're not just stewards. We're sentinels, guardians of the ship. It's given the crews a new sense of pride. It's good." That was the weakness she exposed. "James," Marcus said, staring into his coffee. "Not just her prejudice, but the fact that a good professional steward like Emily was left trembling, powerless. That's a system failure. We can't legislate away racism, but we can build a system that refuses to tolerate it. You've done good work. This promotion to Director of Onboard Experience is well earned. Thank you, sir." And Mr. Penn's new logistics engine went live last week. Marcus said, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. Arthur was right. The man's a genius. He was buried under that awful woman. His predictive engine has already saved 15 million United States dollars in fuel costs by rerouting cargo around a port strike in Singapore that no one else saw coming. I've made him VP of Global Logistics. Turns out competence is a hell of an asset. "And her, sir?" James asked, his voice hesitant. "Ms. Sterling." Marcus's smile faded. He had, in fact, kept tabs. She declared bankruptcy 2 months ago. The invoice was the final straw. Her assets were liquidated. She lost her home. She lost everything. He took a sip of coffee. As for the $38K, the company attached it as a lien to her bankruptcy filing. We'll likely get pennies on the dollar, but it wasn't about the money. It was about the accounting. "I see," James said quietly. Marcus looked up. "Oh, and one final good piece of news. I got a card from the wife of Mr. Reynolds, the passenger we diverted for. He made a full recovery. He's back in Florida playing golf. His grandchildren sent me a crayon drawing of an airplane. It's wonderful to hear, Mr. Thorne." "'Tis," Marcus agreed. "It's good to be reminded that for every one passenger who makes the world worse, there are hundreds who are just good people. Now, walk me through the new de-escalation protocols one more time." The gate for Swift Ferry's 40,045 in Fort Lauderdale was a special kind of hell. It was 9 p.m. at Terminal C's aging, cramped waiting area. The Bahamas ferry was delayed again for 3 hours. The air conditioning was broken, and the terminal was a thick, humid soup of angry, sweating passengers. "This is unacceptable." A man in a beer-stained tank top roared, slamming his meaty fist on the counter. "You told us 7 p.m., then 8 p.m., now 10:30. What are you people?" "A bunch of idiots." Behind the counter, a woman in a garish polyester blue uniform and an ill-fitting blazer flinched. But her face remained a practiced neutral mask. Her name badge read simply Margaret. "Sir, I understand your frustration," Margaret Sterling said, her voice a monotone, worn smooth by hours of abuse. "It is a mechanical issue with the ferry. We are waiting for a new part to be flown in. We are doing everything we can. Doing everything. Doing everything. I'm missing a day of my vacation. You owe me. I want a hotel voucher and a meal. And I want you fired. You're useless. What's your name, Margaret? I'm reporting you to your supervisor." "You are welcome to file a complaint, sir," Margaret said, her eyes dead. "But our policy for a mechanical delay does not include hotel vouchers. Policy. I'll show you a policy." He hurled his half-empty water bottle at her. It struck the plexiglass divider and splashed lukewarm water all over her computer. Margaret didn't even blink. She just picked up a paper towel, wiped the keyboard, and looked at the next person in line. "Next, please." This was her life now. After the bankruptcy, she had been untouchable. Her name was toxic in the logistics world. No one would hire her. She'd burned through her savings, sold her car, and finally, desperately, taken the only job she could get, a minimum wage, high-stress position as a terminal agent for a third tier, locust carrier. She, who had flown in suites, now slept in a tiny windowless room in a shared apartment in Queens. She, who had demanded champagne, now ate her meals from a vending machine. She, who had threatened the jobs of others, now had her own job threatened a dozen times a day. A sudden, powerful roar made her look up out the grime-streaked terminal window. On the channel, sleek and blue, a Zenith Cruise Line ship, Voyage 815, was gliding past. Its lights were bright, its engines a confident, powerful hum. It was heading for London, for a world of warm towels, life lap beds, and quiet respect. Margaret watched it until its tail fin disappeared. She felt a hollow, aching void. A phantom limb of a life she'd amputated herself, ma'am. She turned. A young, tired mother was in front of her. "Ma'am, the trip's been canceled, hasn't it?" "JUST, just tell me the truth." Margaret looked at the computer. The red canceled graphic was flashing. She looked at the line of 50 angry people behind the woman. She took a deep breath, braced for the coming storm. "Yes, I'm afraid it has. Please, everyone, listen. I have an announcement." The shouting began immediately. Margaret just stood there, a human dam taking it all. This was her seat now, in her cabin, for the rest of her life. And just like that, with the click of a closing security gate, Margaret Sterling's world was over. She didn't just lose her seat. She lost her company, her reputation, and her future. All because she couldn't stand to see a black man in the penthouse deck. The man she called an element turned out to be the man who owned the entire element. This story is a powerful reminder that prejudice isn't just ugly, it's expensive. The karma in this case wasn't just losing a contract. It was being forced to pay quite literally for the consequences of her hate. She was ruined by the man she tried to ruin, and her own smarter subordinate took her place. What do you think? Was this karma deserved? Was the £38,000 invoice a step too far? Or was it the perfect lesson? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to see it. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more true life stories of justice and karma. Click that bell icon so you never miss an upload. Until next time, remember, be kind to the people you meet. You never, ever know who they really are.